There we go.
We're live on YouTube. Welcome to the support group conversation. It's Wednesday everywhere in the world except some places. I am your co-host, Lee Matos, and we have the other co-host,
Lyle Kozlov. And this is Luca, who decided to join us live on YouTube.
Nice. Welcome, Luca. Love having Luca in my calls. So we have our slide deck. We have our agenda. Feel free to pop in your questions there. I'm going to pull it up on my other screen and we'll go from there. I populated cheekily with 2 questions firsthand from myself that I'll answer, and then y'all can paste in some more. So the first one, what are you doing to improve the quantity of feedback we get from tickets? We get a lot of feedback already, which we're very excited about, but we're rolling out a new system where we will have per response feedback. We've trialed this in EMEA, and we've seen some great things there. So we're looking to roll that out across the globe. Before, you could just give us feedback at the end of a ticket. Now we want to get feedback all the way through the ticket lifecycle so we can be even more nimble and help. So that's something that we're very excited about. So shout outs to our EMEA team for leading that charge and exploring and experimenting with that. And we're looking to adopt that around the rest of the world. So just wanted to draw attention to that. And the next one here I have is something else that we're working on that we're very excited about. So the question is, how is the support team evolving at scale? When I joined GitLab, we were smaller than our support team is now. So that's something to think about and something that's very interesting. So with that, we have experimented and explored as a team and helped to understand more about ways that we can operate and scale. And senior leadership came together to propose where we're headed and how we want to scale with the rest of the support team. So we're working on that in this epic. So we're very excited. So if you're curious or interested, you can check out that epic and see some more things there. So I want to turn it over. There's no more questions in the doc. That was your time. I gave some filler time so you can put some questions in there and not feel awkward. And now here we are, awkward. Also, this is live on YouTube, and I'm realizing I left this cabinet open behind me. Killer. Anyway, any questions for us?
As a note for the feedback, Lee, we're also rolling out that new form in the support portal sometime this month that allows them to submit feedback directly via new ticket.
Awesome. That's exciting. If you have anywhere to link to that or any artifact we can share, feel free to post it there as well in the agenda. Yes, the agenda.
Then let me throw a question out there. Lee, do you already have any feedback you can share with us about the changes you've made to go to focus more on the new tickets and our SLAs there than on the tickets that have already gotten a first response?
Sure, that's a great question, Daniel, and some more context for the room. So right now we have 2 clocks that we pay attention to in Zendesk. When a ticket first comes in, it gets what's called a first reply time, SLA, right? And that's a clock that starts ticking down. And we need to deliver a reply by the time that before that clock goes to 0, right? It's like the Keanu Reeves movie, 60 seconds, right? You're on the bus and it's driving and you got to get the time. Then the 60 minutes, I don't remember what the movie was. You all know what I'm talking about. It's a 90s hit. And then we have the next reply time clock as well. So that is after the first reply, we also have a clock and it ticks down. We're looking to evolve our approach. We've used both of them in the past, and the industry standard is first reply time, and then they don't track next reply at all. We did, that helped us keep a sense of tickets flowing, but we are trying to evolve that as we scale to understand when and where we need flexibility. So Daniel's question was around, have we seen any feedback from customers, positive or negative, around us shifting more towards focusing on FRT? And at the moment, I can't say that I have. I want to open the floor. Lyle, anyone else, Val, Jason, Ilya, if you have any thoughts, positive or negative from there. We've been paying attention to our SSAT. It seems to be rising or on trend about where we've been. So that's a good sign. But I don't have any more specific examples than that off the top of my head, but I defer.
I know we have on the feedback form that customers submit, we have something about timing, how timely it was and all that stuff. I've been monitoring that since we've been moving our focus. I haven't seen a rise in that, which tells me they still think we're delivering support in a very timely manner, which is good.
Yeah, and I want to take a minute to echo to everyone who isn't in support. One of the big things that we realized when we were a much smaller team and the way that we collaborated, it was really helpful to have first reply time and next reply time clocks, and it helped to keep things flowing. But as we grow and as we scale and as we work through tickets, we know that we need more flexibility. It started to constrain our team. It didn't serve us to keep pumping out in that kind of way. We wanted to think it through and give engineers more space and flexibility to set expectations with specific customers and then meet those expectations and have more flexibility to do that versus a much more rigid cadence. So thanks, Jason, for that context there as well. So Daniel, does that help?
Thus, enough
Great.
for now.
Thank you. Other questions from the room?
Question.
Thanks. Go for it.
I'm looking at slide 30. It's about documentations. Of course, I'm interested in it. And I'm noticing that a significant number of our tickets link to handbook content. And I am curious about why, since theoretically that's internally focused documentation, not customer focused documentation.
Lyle, you unmuted. Go. I saw it.
I did. I'm gonna guess, but I'll bet that handbook content includes our statement of support about .gitlab.com/support, which we link to quite frequently.
Handbook in this term would be anything from about.gitlab.com. So anything linking to our support handbook, tickets where we have to ask customers to provide entitlement, we send them the link where that's explained. That's about.gitlab.com. So you're going to see a high amount of handbook links, especially since a lot of our autoresponders do refer to, the main support page.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Lyle and Jason. Great question. And Christy, if you can get that in the agenda, just so we have a record of it. Daniel, your question as well, that'd be great. Other questions?
I just want to say,
I got one.
you ever delightfully helped me out by putting it in the agenda for me.
Awesome, thanks. Jamie, go for it.
Yeah, I was curious for support's thoughts on if there's a significant delta in support's maybe success rate is the right way to talk about this objectively, but any strengths or weaknesses you see in SaaS versus self-managed contexts, i.e. do support engineers feel like they're better able to address tickets of this type in a self-managed context versus a .com context? Curious if there's any strengths to one type of tenancy versus the other. And then I would be curious if there is, what support is doing to try and close that gap and bring parity to either experience.
It's a great question, Jamie, but I have to ask you one question first. What is this bike in the background? Tell me what this thing is. How does that work? What is going on?
That's my wife's bike, but that's not a trainer. It's called a Kicker Core, and I use that with Zwift, which is like a
nice
virtual reality social training experience. A lot of fun.
That makes a lot of sense. I was just like, this back wheel is something crazy here. So got it. Thank you. But to Jamie's question, first, what's different about SaaS.com, SaaS support and self-managed, how we approach it, strengths, weaknesses? I think that's an interesting one. And then the follow-up, closing the gap. I have some thoughts here, and then Lyle, I may turn it over to you if you have any other thoughts. It's interesting. Culturally, for a long time, we did have a split between SaaS focused and self-managed. And this is something that we've been smushing together to help all engineers work across both SaaS and self-managed. What I will say is there is internally just a feeling across support engineers that they are different, but really it comes down to a lot around workflows, right? When you're working on SaaS versus self-managed, the way you approach the problem is slightly different and the questions you ask are slightly different. But in theory, the results we can get are very similar a lot of the times. The other difference that comes to my mind heavily is when you're dealing with a SaaS-based context, a lot of the time you're actually answering complex UI usage challenges, right? Where they have a CI pipeline that's doing a thing and they're trying to understand how to get this data in another place and how does that work? Whereas in a self-managed context, we're often dealing with the Linux side where we have processes and things like that, where we're trying to say, how do we scale this infrastructure? So it's sort of Rails or the application versus the infrastructure is the big difference that comes to mind. So we're trying to cross-pollinate across people who have traditionally focused on SaaS and traditionally focused on self-managed to cross-pollinate skills. That's my thought off the top of my head. It doesn't totally answer your question, but Lyle, I want to at least pass it over to you if you have other thoughts or things that come to mind.
Yeah, I was trying to like think through things as you were talking in hopes that I could like give this 100% answer. So it'll be slightly off the cuff here as well. I think SaaS, generally, the tickets are slightly more procedural. And so as a result, we have the troubleshooting workflows are tighter. And so what I'd like to see more for our self-managed customers is that idea of like, okay, here is an Elasticsearch ticket. Here are the 10 things that you should check to make sure that it's not, and like a little bit more of a flow. I think right now we don't have that in the same way. Elasticsearch is actually a poor example because Jason put together a really good Elasticsearch troubleshooting guide. But that's kind of that kind of thing where we have, yeah, just a more standard way of approaching tickets from the beginning, because there's a lot of variance in our self-managed tickets. But I think we're starting on that. Our support forms, we're going to start iterating on those to make sure that the problem types are better mapped to problem types, and our engineers are better mapped to those problem types. But on this, another thing that I like about SaaS is that we have access to the logs within Kibana, and that we can get some data out of that we can't get out of the raw logs we get from self-managed without ingesting them. And that's something that folks that traditionally focus more on self-managed, I think that it's a tool that we don't use quite often enough. I mean, that said, Will has done a great job with fast stats, and we can get a lot of the same data that you might get out of Kibana now using tools that we've made ourselves. But I think there's some untapped potential in some of the observability tools we have on .com to be used in self-managed. So.
Yeah, I love that answer. And you plucked that thought right from my brain, Lyle. That was exactly where I was thinking. To me, that's the most obvious sort of disparity that exists. SaaS to self-managed is with SaaS, we've got that first order access to observability. We can, somebody says, hey, I got this weird error. Well, you can go look up, that username and find that error, and you're there immediately. You're not waiting for a turn on, well, hey, please run fast stats or GitLab SOS and get me these logs and talk to you in 24 hours, and your context switching. So totally vibe with that. I would love to see like an evolution of these, sort of self-managed tools. We say, hey, please run GitLab SOS to something that provides us that more immediate visceral access like we get with Kibana.com, right? Some kind of like remote terminal, or I'm not sure what, and I know there's, touchiness with customers and what do you want me to run and how, what does this send back? And, that's probably the biggest hurdle we've got with self-managed, but cool. Appreciate the thoughts.
Yeah, to that end, I want to add one more thing. Support engineer Davin Walker is working on a tool right now that he's calling Green Hat. It's in our support toolbox that does a little bit of this coalescing. It takes a GitLab SOS support report and gives us some view and data into that. So it helps us do a little bit more. It's kind of like fast stats UI, if you will. They're both both ways to work. So yeah, but I agree with you, Jamie. Great question. I'm going to go back to our agenda. All right, next question. Ticket deflection on slide 32. Okay,
Yeah.
vocalize it, please.
It's me, Haley. I was wondering about slide 32 and the ticket deflection project. Just wanted to understand more about what that is. And I think, Jason, you answered me already. So thank you for that. And then I was just curious because the chart on the right-hand side shows ticket deflection. And I was curious if that's kind of, we're counting ticket deflection as just a unique view, right? So we assume that they viewed the article and then that answered their question and kind of, avoided a ticket. Just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly.
Yeah, Ilya, I see you
I'll try, yeah. So these are the Google Analytics results for that support page. So essentially, whenever they click on one of our documents and then leave the support page, it would be considered as an exit, essentially. So we can't be sure that they haven't come back later and opened up a ticket, but this is the info that we have, yeah.
And on that, yeah, our vision here is how can we help them self-serve? How can we help them avoid creating tickets just from the, we're happy to help, but if you could self-serve, that's everybody's dream, right? So we want to make that possible. So cool. That's
great. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think you have the next one as well.
I do. I'm on slide 19. I was curious if the SLA achievement looks great, but the large GitLab.com percent SLA achievement is a bit lower than the rest. So I was wondering if we know why or have any ideas of or theories.
Yes, this is a great one. So in our data, it's always interesting when we slice these when we present, because in our day-to-day, we don't particularly in our views segment by large, mid-market, SMB, right? We have a view of our .com customers, and we know that they might be bronze, silver, or gold, but we don't pay attention to if they're large or small, right? That's something that we don't. But when we do report on it, we see data like this, where it's like, that's really fascinating that the large customers, the achieved SLA here is lower. So with that, I can only begin to speculate that it comes down to complexity. There's also a chance that some of these, and I lean to other managers on the call, some of these could be those kind of group 2FA resets where they might get a little complex and we're diving in. I'm not sure. And obviously we could potentially get faster on those. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that happens when we slice it and we see this, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but other managers, feel free to chime in.
Just having looked at those tickets and stuff, sync and stuff, they're more complex than your SMB tickets. Your smaller customers have very small setups, and they tend to be omnibus setups where when you get to large, you're looking at Geo, HA, Kubernetes. You start getting into these huge setups that are like, right, this isn't a glance at and fix quickly. This is I'm gonna have to dig into this and really get at it. And that'd be my guess.
And on this one, Jason, we're talking specifically around .com as well. So I think it's interesting to see on .com that it appears that larger customers still have complexities in .com. But Christine, that's an interesting one. I'm curious myself, so I'm going to see if I can get some follow-up on that. So if I get anything interesting, I'll tag you. But that 191, if we look at those 191 tickets and we look at the ticket subjects, I think that that'll give us enough to say, aha, and get some answers there. So great question.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking. And I saw a lot of people corrected me on my movie. Yes, it was Speed long ago when I was making a Keanu reference. I swear it was called 60 Minutes. What is this? That was a horrible movie title. So anyway, all right. Any other questions? Lyle, should we call it? Amazing. Thank you all. Appreciate your questions. Thank you for your help and partnership. I see a lot of faces in this room that work with support to help us help our customers. So really appreciate that from the documentation, the UX side, from the sales side, and the customer success side as well. If I missed your department and you're in engineering, I think I've covered most of them at this point. Maybe people ops is in the room too as well. Thanks for your help. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a happy Wednesday if it's Wednesday where you are.